Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
Alex sat on the weathered porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the neighborhood. The air was thick with the scent of freshly mown grass, a smell that usually calmed the nerves after a grueling day. But today the breeze felt sharp, unsettling, as if the world was holding its breath. The faint hum of distant lawnmowers and the occasional chirp of birds in the trees did nothing to mask the tension growing in Alex's chest. Their fingers drummed on the armrest of the chair, the rhythmic tapping betraying a restless energy. It had been one of those days, too many hours at the office, too many petty arguments with coworkers. Now all Alex wanted was peace, a moment of stillness to clear their mind. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The sound of footsteps, sharp and purposeful, broke the serenity. Alex turned their head slowly, eyes narrowing as a figure strode up the driveway. Karen. Of course. Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of neighborhood order, had arrived once again, her expression set in the familiar mask of disdain. Her presence was like a cloud of doom, always looming, always demanding. Karen paused at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, her eyes scanning the porch with the scrutiny of a hawk watching its prey. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice icy, the kind that made the air around her feel just a little bit colder. Alex felt their heart rate spike, irritation rising in their chest. "What's up, Karen?" they replied, trying to keep their tone neutral, though the words felt sharp in their mouth. They had hoped for a quiet evening, not another confrontation. "You can't sit there," Karen said matter-of-factly, as if this was a normal, everyday declaration. "You're in violation of HOA rules. It's right there in the fine print." Alex blinked, momentarily taken aback. "What do you mean? It's my porch. My property." Karen lifted her chin, a smug glint in her eyes. "Doesn't matter. You've violated the HOA's rule about outdoor furniture placement. It's an eyesore and it's affecting the neighborhood's aesthetic." The absurdity of the statement hit Alex like a punch to the gut. An eyesore? Alex had set up a simple chair on their own porch, nothing more. No bright colors, no tacky decorations. Just a worn-out chair where they could relax and watch the world go by. But apparently to Karen, it was an abomination, a blight on the otherwise pristine neighborhood. "You've got to be kidding me," Alex muttered, but Karen didn't seem to hear them. Instead, she crossed her arms more tightly and gave Alex a look that suggested they were wasting her time. She wasn't here to negotiate or listen, she was here to enforce. Alex stood slowly, trying to quell the rising anger in their chest. The audacity of this woman, of this whole HOA system, never ceased to amaze them. Karen had made it her mission to oversee every little aspect of their lives, from the color of the front door to the height of the grass. It was one of the reasons Alex had considered leaving the neighborhood. Too many rules, too many people with too much time on their hands, meddling in everyone else's business. "Karen, this is my property," Alex said, trying to keep their voice steady, though the frustration was evident. "You can't just come here and tell me what to do." "I can and I will," Karen snapped, her voice growing colder. "I'm giving you one chance to move the chair and remove the other items off the porch. Otherwise I'll report you to the HOA board. You'll be fined, and if you keep this up we'll start discussing more serious measures." A chill ran down Alex's spine at the mention of the fine. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle of it. The HOA had always been a thorn in their side, a constant source of irritation. They had been through this before, each time with more absurd rules, more petty complaints. But this time something inside Alex snapped. Enough was enough. "You think you can just walk up here and dictate to me?" Alex's voice raised slightly, laced with disbelief. "This is my home, Karen. I don't need your permission to sit on my porch." Karen's lips curled into a tight, dismissive smile. "You should have thought of that before you broke the rules," she said, turning on her heel, preparing to walk away. "I'll be reporting this to the board. You've been warned." Alex watched her retreating figure, a ball of frustration and anger swelling in their chest. There was the same old act. The same sense of superiority, as if she held the power of the universe in her hands simply because she was a self-appointed neighborhood gatekeeper. It had happened so many times before, with other residents cowering under the weight of her authority, afraid to speak out. But Alex wasn't like the others. The thought of letting this go, of caving in to Karen's tyrannical behavior, made their blood boil. They knew they couldn't let this go. Not this time. Alex's phone buzzed in their pocket, a welcome distraction from the tightening tension in their chest. They pulled it out, eyes scanning the screen as they read the message. It was from their Marine unit, an update about an upcoming operation. For a moment they stared at the message, a sense of purpose flooding through them. The quiet, orderly life they had been trying to maintain had just been shattered by a woman who thought she could bully them into submission. But Alex wasn't just any homeowner. They weren't going to bend to the whims of a self-righteous neighbor who had too much time on her hands. The message was simple, but it sparked something inside them. Alex smiled grimly, the frustration giving way to something colder, something calculated. Karen had no idea what she had just started. As Alex stood there looking out at the neighborhood, so perfectly manicured, so orderly, one thought burned through their mind: it was time to put an end to this. This wasn't just about a chair. It was about standing up for themselves. For dignity. For justice. And Alex wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. As Karen disappeared into the distance, her victory brief and smug, Alex made a quiet promise to themselves: they were going to take the fight to her. In the most unexpected way possible. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. Alex sat in their living room, staring out the window, still seething from the confrontation with Karen. The anger that had initially flared now simmered just beneath the surface, an undercurrent of frustration that gnawed at them. They couldn't let it go. Not this time. The chair on the porch, now an insignificant piece of furniture, had become a symbol of every time they had let someone like Karen walk over them. This wasn't just about one confrontation. This was about the constant erosion of their autonomy, the little things that added up, leaving them feeling powerless in a place they should have been able to call home. They had been patient for far too long, always giving in to the endless demands and petty rules that came from the HOA, but Karen had crossed a line. This time there was no backing down. Alex's fingers hovered over the phone as the thoughts rushed through their mind, each idea more daring than the last. They knew how these people worked: the HOA board, Karen, the whole neighborhood. It wasn't about reason. It wasn't about fairness. It was about power and who had the upper hand. And for once, Alex was determined to seize it. A ping from their phone broke their concentration, and they glanced at the screen. It was a message from their old Marine unit, a routine update about an upcoming training exercise. Alex's thumb hovered over the message, but then something clicked in their mind. This was exactly what they needed. The military, the Marine Corps, those years of discipline and strategy, had given Alex the tools they needed to think 2 steps ahead. Karen, for all her smugness and confidence, was just a small player in a much larger game. And Alex wasn't going to lose this round. The idea formed quickly, like a lock snapping into place. If Karen thought she could push them around, it was time to show her just how wrong she was. But Alex couldn't just walk up to her and demand she back off. No, that would be too easy. That would be exactly what Karen expected. The key was in making her feel small, making her see the futility of her position in the grand scheme of things. Alex's mind started turning with the precision of a military operation. What was Karen's weakness? What made her tick? The answer was simple: she thrived on control. She was the queen of her tiny realm, the self-appointed enforcer of every rule, no matter how ridiculous. But like all people who held too tightly to their authority, she had a fatal flaw: an ego too big for her own good. Her obsession with maintaining that power, especially in front of the neighborhood, was her Achilles heel. Alex grinned, the corners of their mouth curving into something dangerous. This wasn't going to be about petty fines or sitting on a porch. It was about taking Karen's own arrogance and using it against her, making her pay for every time she had looked down on someone, for every time she had acted like she was untouchable. The plan began to take shape, and Alex's fingers danced across the phone, reaching out to an old contact, someone from their Marine unit who owed them a favor. The message was simple: asterisk, got a job for you. We need some help. I'll explain later. Asterisk. Alex didn't need to explain more. They knew exactly what they were doing. Karen had made a mistake, one that she didn't even realize yet. She thought this was just about a chair on a porch, a little inconvenience in her quest to be the neighborhood's enforcer. What she didn't understand was that Alex wasn't some passive homeowner who would just roll over. No, they had connections, they had resources, and most importantly, they had patience. The next morning, Alex received the confirmation they had been waiting for. The Marine unit was on board. The plan would unfold in stages, carefully timed, each piece falling into place like a puzzle. There would be no violent confrontation, no direct conflict. That would only play into Karen's hands. This had to be surgical, precise, and above all, humiliating. Alex needed her to feel like a fool. They needed her to realize that, for all her power over the HOA, she was nothing compared to the bigger forces at play. Alex sat back in their chair, letting out a long breath. The anger that had fueled their thoughts the night before had been replaced with a cool, calculated resolve. They could almost hear Karen's voice in their head, dripping with smug superiority, and it only strengthened Alex's resolve. This wasn't just for them. This was for everyone who had been bullied by people like Karen. This was for the neighborhood that had suffered under her thumb, too afraid to speak up. Karen had no idea what was coming. She thought she could intimidate people into submission with her petty rules and hollow threats. But Alex had learned a thing or two during their years in the Marines. When you're in a battle, it's not always the strongest or the loudest who wins. It's the one who can outsmart their opponent, who knows when to strike and when to wait. And Alex wasn't about to make the mistake of charging in blindly. The first step was to gather intel. Alex would start with small, seemingly innocent interactions, subtly positioning themselves as the underdog. They would let Karen think she had the upper hand, let her become complacent in her belief that she could walk all over them. And then, when the moment was right, they would unleash the full force of their plan. One that would leave Karen humiliated, her authority shattered in front of everyone who had ever looked to her for guidance. The clock ticked and Alex felt the anticipation build. This wasn't just a fight over a chair anymore. This was a battle for control, for respect, and for the satisfaction of finally putting Karen in her place. And in the back of their mind, Alex couldn't help but smile at the thought of her face when the Marine unit rolled up, fully decked out, in uniform, when the weight of everything she had built up crumbled in an instant. That moment was coming and Alex would be ready. The days passed slowly, the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Alex's plan was coming together in the quiet of their home, the hum of routine masking the storm they were about to unleash. Each step had to be calculated, each move deliberate. There was no room for mistakes. The game had changed. This wasn't just about a porch chair anymore. It was about showing Karen that there were consequences for her actions, and Alex was about to make her realize just how wrong she was to think she could dictate their life. The first part of the plan was deceptively simple: set the stage, gather the audience. Alex began spending more time outside, casually chatting with neighbors, always with a friendly smile, never giving away what was coming. They even went so far as to invite a few of them over for drinks, a subtle way to make sure Karen was watching. After all, she thrived on attention, on control. Alex was simply giving her what she wanted, while laying the groundwork for the bombshell that would follow. Karen didn't seem to notice the shift at first. She still marched through the neighborhood with her usual air of superiority, her self-appointed role as the neighborhood enforcer never wavering. The HOA complaints continued to roll in, as predictable as the setting sun, but something in Alex had changed. They were no longer the passive resident she could push around. Alex was playing the long game now. It was on a Saturday morning, just after breakfast, that Karen appeared at Alex's front door again. This time she didn't even bother with pleasantries. Her face was tight, her eyes sharp with that same condescending gleam. Alex had seen it enough times to know exactly what it meant. She was here to lay down the law. "I'm not going to repeat myself, Alex," Karen began, her voice edged with irritation. "You've already been warned. I'm reporting you to the HOA board again if you don't remove that chair from your porch by the end of today." Alex stood at the door, a calm smile on their face. The silence between them stretched just long enough to make Karen uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Karen," they said, their voice low and steady, "but I'm not moving it. This is my property, and I have every right to sit on my porch however I choose." Karen's nostrils flared, and her lips curled into that patronizing half-smile. "You can sit there if you want, but I'll make sure the board knows about this. You're going to regret this." She turned to leave, but Alex's eyes followed her. They knew Karen wouldn't back down easily. She had too much pride, too much need to feel superior. And Alex knew that the more Karen pressed, the more it would backfire on her. The key was patience. The next phase of the plan kicked into motion that afternoon. Alex received a call from one of their Marine buddies, confirming that everything was set for the big reveal. They had spent the last few days securing a few key pieces of the puzzle, a few uniformed Marines who were more than willing to lend their support, and a strategically timed appearance that would ensure Karen was watching. The beauty of it was in the simplicity. Karen wouldn't know what hit her. At noon, Alex set the plan into motion. They walked outside, taking a seat in the same old chair on the porch, pretending to relax. The warm sun filtered through the trees, the world outside their house moving at a slow, peaceful pace. The neighbors watched from their windows, sensing something different in the air but unsure of what exactly was about to unfold. Then, without warning, the unmistakable sound of military vehicles approaching broke the stillness. The rumble of engines grew louder, and the tension around Alex's porch thickened. They glanced at Karen's house, watching her appear on her doorstep, no doubt already drawn to the noise. Alex allowed themselves a small, satisfied grin. The vehicles pulled up to the curb, a convoy of military trucks, their matte green exteriors glinting under the afternoon sun. The trucks stopped, the engines humming to a halt, and the door of the first truck swung open. Out stepped several Marines, tall and imposing, their uniforms sharp and immaculate. Alex stood slowly, heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and exhilaration. This was the moment. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief, her hands gripping the railing as if she needed something to steady herself. She hadn't seen it coming, no one had. Alex had kept the details hidden, making sure Karen was never suspicious. They had known the best way to get under her skin was to show her that the rules she held so tightly to were meaningless in the grand scheme of things. No HOA, no neighborhood watch, no petty rules could touch this. "Can I help you?" Karen's voice wavered, her usual confidence faltering as she tried to collect herself. The sight of uniformed Marines on her street, clearly out of place in this suburban neighborhood, threw her completely off balance. One of the Marines stepped forward, his posture rigid and disciplined. "We're here to speak with the homeowner," he said, his voice calm and official. "We've been notified that there's an issue with the placement of a chair on the porch. Could you point us to the property in question?" Karen's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She glanced between the Marines and Alex, a growing sense of unease rippling through her. This wasn't what she had expected. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Alex stepped forward, their voice steady and authoritative. "The chair is on my porch where it belongs. I've followed all the proper procedures, Karen, and I'm afraid there's no issue here." The Marines stood in perfect formation behind them, each of them imposing in their own right, and Alex could see the flicker of uncertainty in Karen's eyes. She wasn't used to being questioned, much less challenged in front of an audience. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," Alex continued, their words cutting through the air. "But I think we can clear it up quickly." As Karen fumbled for an excuse, Alex realized that the moment of reckoning had arrived. The balance of power had shifted. And as the Marines stood silently at attention, it was clear that Karen's little kingdom was crumbling, piece by piece. Alex had won. The atmosphere in the neighborhood had shifted, a subtle ripple that spread like a wave from Alex's porch. Karen stood frozen, her mind scrambling for control as the Marines maintained their perfect formation, their presence undeniable. Her usual bravado had crumbled, replaced by a deep, unsettling silence. The front door of her house swung open, and her husband, Dan, appeared, his eyes darting between her and the uniformed men on the street. He looked confused but also, for the first time in a long while, concerned. Karen's grip on the railing tightened, her knuckles white. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice cracking as the weight of her situation began to hit her. "What's going on here?" Alex stood tall, watching her closely, their resolve steady. This was the moment of triumph, but it wasn't enough to just win. No, the real victory lay in the way Karen had to confront the full measure of her arrogance, the way her self-created world was about to come crashing down. "The Marines are here to make sure everything is in order, Karen," Alex said coolly. "You've made quite the fuss over a chair, and I just wanted to show you that not everyone's rules are as small as yours. There's a bigger world out here, and you're not the one running it." Karen's eyes narrowed, a flash of fury crossing her features as she realized what had just happened. She opened her mouth to argue, but Alex raised a hand, cutting her off. "It's over. You've lost, Karen. The neighborhood is watching, and you've just become a cautionary tale. No one's going to be scared of you anymore." The Marines didn't move, their disciplined posture unwavering, but the look of silent judgment in their eyes spoke volumes. They were a presence, and they were here for Alex, not for Karen. This wasn't some petty neighborhood dispute anymore. This was a statement. Karen's face flushed with humiliation. Her hands trembled as she tried to collect herself, her usual sharp tone faltering. "You can't just, this is illegal," she blustered, but the words came out weak, desperate. "I can," Alex replied, their voice calm, but there was an edge to it now, a power that was impossible to ignore. "I have every right to be on my own porch, Karen. And I think the Marines here will back me up on that." Alex turned to one of the soldiers, nodding slightly. The Marine acknowledged the gesture with a subtle nod, his silence speaking louder than any words could. Karen's breath quickened, her face contorted in frustration, but the game was over. The very thing she had spent years building, her authority over the HOA, her dominance in the neighborhood, had just unraveled. There was no coming back from this. Alex took a step forward, their gaze unflinching. "This isn't just about the chair, is it?" This is about control. You've spent so much time pushing people around, you've forgotten what it's like to actually respect someone. You thought you could take away my right to exist in my own space, and that's not something I'm willing to let slide. The words hit Karen harder than Alex had expected. The mask of superiority that had always been so firmly in place began to crack, and for the first time, Alex saw the woman behind the facade, scared, broken, and unsure. The weight of her own pride had trapped her in a position she couldn't escape. Alex could see it in her eyes now. She knew she'd made a mistake. But it wasn't enough to stop there. Alex's victory wasn't complete without one last, satisfying sting. They turned back to the Marine unit, gesturing to the nearest soldier. You'll want to send a copy of the report to the HOA board. Let them know Karen's been harassing me for weeks over this chair. I'm sure they'll want to review her conduct. Maybe she'll be more careful next time. A flash of realization crossed Karen's face as the words sank in. She had underestimated Alex, but she had also underestimated the power of the very system she'd used to torment others. The Marine's simple acknowledgement of Alex's request was enough to seal her fate. Her reputation, her position in the HOA, everything she had worked for was now in jeopardy. Dan, still standing at the door, took a step forward. His face was drawn, the tension in his shoulders betraying his own uncertainty. Karen, what's going on? His voice was soft, and for the first time, it sounded more like a question than an order. Karen snapped her head toward him, her eyes wild. Don't you dare side with them. Her voice was shrill, but Dan didn't flinch. Instead, he gave a small, resigned shake of his head, as though a part of him had already realized the truth. Alex could see it in his eyes now, the flicker of doubt about his wife's authority, about the way she had pushed everyone around for so long. He wasn't ready to turn on her, not yet, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Alex didn't wait for Karen to say anything more. They turned, walking back to their porch chair, sitting down with a calm that felt like a declaration of victory in itself. The neighbors had gathered, watching from their windows and doorways, the tension in the air palpable. Alex didn't need to say anything more. The silence was heavy with the weight of the situation. There would be no immediate comeback, no final retort from Karen. She had been bested, outsmarted, outplayed, and exposed in front of everyone. There was no escape for her now. A few minutes passed, and then Karen turned, her face pale, her posture slumped as she walked back toward her house, defeated. Dan stayed behind for a moment, still unsure of what had just transpired. But there was no saving the situation. Karen's reign was over. Alex leaned back in their chair, the cool evening breeze brushing across their face. It was over. The victory was theirs. But more than that, it was the satisfaction of seeing justice unfold, the moment when the wrongs were righted and the balance of power was restored. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex knew that this wasn't just about one petty HOA dispute. This was a message. No one, not Karen nor anyone else, would ever again have the power to control their life. They had fought for it and they had won.